Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. That's cute, sweetheart, but the adults are bidding now. His words sliced through the ballroom, drawing scattered laughter from diamond-draped spectators. The young nurse's hand, still half raised with her bid card, trembled slightly as the red flush of humiliation crept up her neck. $300,000. Every cent her hospital staff had managed to scrape together suddenly seemed pathetically small beneath the crystal chandeliers. The auctioneer's gavel hovered mid-air as the businessman lounged in his front row seat, casually adding another $100,000 to his bid with a flick of his manicured finger. He wasn't even looking at the critical care equipment on the auction block. His eyes were fixed on the nurse's reddening face, savoring her defeat like an expensive wine. Around them, Manhattan's elite shifted uncomfortably, their charity momentarily revealed as the social game it was. In the shadowed corner of the back row, a man in a simple black suit watched silently. Most hadn't noticed him enter. Unlike the others, his attention wasn't on the embarrassed nurse or the smirking executive, but on the pediatric ventilator system being auctioned. His fingers moved quietly across his phone screen as the auctioneer began his going once countdown, the businessman already accepting congratulations from his companions. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. Sarah Winters hadn't belonged in this room from the moment she'd stepped onto the polished marble floor. Her modest black dress, the nicest thing she owned, was a shadow among sequins and designer labels that cost more than her monthly salary. But tonight wasn't about her. The envelope clutched in her handbag contained $300,000, 6 months of fundraising bake sales, charity runs, and donation drives by every staff member at St. Clair's Children's Hospital. Their pediatric ICU had been operating with ventilators that were nearly 15 years old. Every day was a prayer that the aging machines would keep breathing for their tiny patients. When the hospital administration had denied their budget request for the third year running, the staff had taken matters into their own hands. This charity auction, benefiting children's causes, had seemed like providence when they learned one of the items was exactly the ventilator system they desperately needed. The businessman, Carlton Rhodes, was well known in investment circles for his aggressive acquisitions and equally aggressive personality. His presence at charity events was motivated by networking opportunities rather than philanthropy, evidenced by how he worked the room before the bidding began, barely glancing at the auction catalog except to note the items that would draw the most attention when he won them. Sarah had started bidding nervously, her voice almost a whisper until the auctioneer kindly acknowledged her with a nod. For the first few bids, she had dared to hope. The price remained within their budget, climbing slowly toward their maximum. Then, Carlton had noticed her, his attention drawn not by the equipment, but by the incongruity of her presence among the wealthy donors. His eyes narrowed with amusement as he realized what was happening. $250,000, Sarah called out, her voice stronger now, emboldened by purpose. She calculated quickly. They could stretch to $300,000, but that was absolute maximum. $300,000, Carlton countered lazily, swirling the champagne in his glass. His companions chuckled as if he'd made a clever joke. He hadn't even bothered to raise his bid card properly. $300,000, Sarah repeated her final offer. The tremor in her voice wasn't from nervousness anymore, but from the effort of controlling her emotions. That's when Carlton delivered his cutting remark and casual bid increase that had silenced the room. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of embarrassment and uncomfortable amusement, the kind that comes when someone says aloud the ugly truth that underlies a beautiful facade. This wasn't about helping children. For most of them, it was about being seen helping children. The auctioneer, a veteran of these high society tension moments, cleared his throat with practiced neutrality. "I have 400,000 from Mr. Rhodes. Do I hear 450? His eyes scanned the crowd, professionally ignoring Sarah's barely contained distress. She slowly lowered her bid card, the weight of defeat visible in the slope of her shoulders. A few seats away from Carlton, a woman in a red gown nudged her husband. Several others exchanged glances that communicated their discomfort, but none raised their cards. The social dynamics were clear. Carlton Rhodes was not someone you challenged publicly, not if you wanted to maintain business relationships or social standing. The moment stretched uncomfortably as the auctioneer began his countdown. The man in the back row continued observing. Unlike the other attendees, he wore no designer label. His suit was well-made but understated, his presence so unassuming that servers had twice overlooked him during champagne service. While most recognize the world's richest innovator by his distinctive profile and public appearances, tonight, Elon Musk had managed something rare in his life: near anonymity. He'd arrived late, declined the offered front row seat, and kept his attention on his phone during most of the proceedings. But now, as the gavel began its descent, his focus was absolute, his expression unreadable in the dimly lit corner of the grand ballroom. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. "Going once," the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing through the suddenly hushed ballroom. Sarah bit her lower lip, struggling to maintain composure. The faces of her patients flashed through her mind: 5-year-old Mia with her stuffed elephant, baby Jaden whose tiny lungs needed constant support, 12-year-old Marcus who'd fought through 3 cardiac surgeries. She'd promised their parents, that she would come back with good news. "Going twice," continued the auctioneer, his gavel poised for the final declaration. Carlton Rhodes leaned back in his chair, already drafting the self-congratulatory social media post in his mind. The ventilator would make an excellent backdrop for his company's annual report section on corporate social responsibility. It might even sit unused in their corporate headquarters lobby, a chrome and steel testament to his generosity. $1 million. The voice from the back of the room was quiet but clear, delivered with the casual confidence of someone ordering coffee. It took a moment for the amount to register with the crowd. Heads turned in unison, searching for the source. The auctioneer blinked rapidly, his professional composure momentarily forgotten. I beg your pardon, sir? Did you say $1 million? $1 million, repeated Elon Musk, now standing. He raised his bid card, number 42, with a slight nod. For the pediatric ventilator system. The room erupted in whispers as recognition spread. Carlton Rhodes twisted in his seat, his face a study in confusion, turning rapidly to disbelief. The smooth confidence that had dominated his expression moments before evaporated as he processed both the bid and the bidder. The auctioneer recovered quickly, professional instincts taking over. $1 million from Mr. Musk. Do I hear 1,100,000? His eyes locked hopefully on Carlton, but the businessman was still processing this unexpected challenge. The unspoken rules of these events typically prevented such dramatic overbidding. It was considered gauche, even hostile. 1,500,000, Carlton finally countered, his voice tight. This was no longer about the ventilator system. It was about saving face in front of Manhattan's elite. He shot a venomous glance toward the back of the room, but Musk wasn't looking at him. Instead, the tech innovator had moved from his corner and was walking slowly down the center aisle, his eyes on Sarah. $2 million, Musk said without turning toward the auctioneer. He stopped beside Sarah's row. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Stunned, she nodded. Whispers crescendoed around them as phones appeared in hands throughout the audience, social media accounts being hastily opened. Carlton Rhodes stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the marble floor. $2,500,000, he snapped. Several of his associates shifted uncomfortably. They knew this had transcended normal auction behavior and was becoming something personal, potentially damaging. Sarah watched this exchange with widening eyes, her gaze moving between the two men. For Musk to spend millions on hospital equipment was objectively generous, but there was something more happening here, something that felt like justice taking physical form in the room. $5 million, Musk stated calmly. He hadn't raised his voice, but the words landed like thunder in the ballroom. He turned slightly toward Sarah and spoke quietly. "St. Clair's Children's Hospital, correct? I drove past it on my way here. Impressive work your team does with limited resources." Sarah nodded, speechless. How did he know where she worked? Had he overheard earlier conversations? Or had he simply noticed the hospital name embroidered on the edge of the folder peeking from her bag? Carlton's face had transformed from flushed anger to something calculating. $5 million was beyond what he was willing to spend on a performative display of charity, especially against an opponent with considerably deeper pockets. But walking away now meant public humiliation. Phones were recording. Twitter would be merciless. "Mr. Rhodes?" the auctioneer prompted, expertly hiding his excitement at how this auction item had escalated far beyond its expected price. Carlton forced a tight smile. "I recognize when I'm outmatched," he said, attempting to sound gracious. "I'll withdraw my bid. Clearly, Mr. Musk wants this particular item very badly." The implication in his tone was clear. This wasn't about charity, but about some ulterior motive. Musk seemed entirely untroubled by either the insinuation or the attention now focused entirely on him. He leaned toward Sarah again. "I believe there are 3 more ventilator systems available from this manufacturer. Would your hospital have use for all of them?" Sarah's professional composure finally broke as tears welled in her eyes. "We absolutely would," she whispered. "That would cover our entire pediatric ICU. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk." Musk nodded and raised his hand again. "Mr. Auctioneer, I'd like to modify my bid. $20 million, but with a condition." The room fell absolutely silent. Even the servers paused mid-stride, champagne flutes forgotten in their hands. The auctioneer's professional demeanor cracked as he fumbled with his gavel. $20 million, sir?" "Yes, but not just for this one system," Musk continued, his voice carrying effortlessly across the now silent room. "I understand the manufacturer can provide 4 complete systems. I'd like all 4 directed to St. Clair's Children's Hospital, with installation and a 10-year service contract included." The auctioneer looked desperately toward the auction committee chairman, who had risen from his seat, mouth agape. This was completely outside normal procedure. The chairman nodded vigorously. $20 million bought a lot of procedural flexibility. "Additionally," Musk continued, "I'd like to speak with Ms." He turned questioningly to Sarah. "Winters," she supplied automatically, still struggling to process what was happening. "Sarah Winters." With Ms. Winters, after the auction about what other equipment her pediatric ICU might need. Carlton Rhodes had remained standing, his expression hardening as he watched his moment of social dominance transform into a public relations disaster. He couldn't match the bid, couldn't outshine the gesture, and couldn't gracefully exit the situation. In a desperate attempt to reclaim some control, he stepped forward. "How nice to see technology billionaires putting on a show," Carlton announced loudly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps next time you could just write a check quietly instead of disrupting the evening's proceedings." He gestured around the room. "Some of us attend these events regularly, not just when we need a publicity stunt." The attempt to reframe Musk's intervention as self-serving fell flat as attendees exchanged uncomfortable glances. Carlton had miscalculated badly, transforming himself from merely insensitive to openly antagonistic toward both a major philanthropic gesture and a children's hospital. Musk turned fully toward Carlton now, studying him with the same focused attention he might give to an engineering problem. When he spoke, his voice was conversational but carried to every corner of the suddenly still room. "You know what I've noticed, Mr. Rhodes? The loudest investors often have the smallest returns." He stood and buttoned his jacket casually. "True impact isn't measured in how many people watch you bid at an auction. It's measured in lives improved or saved." He gestured toward Sarah. "This woman and her colleagues spent 6 months scraping together every dollar they could to help children breathe. You treated her effort as a joke because the dollar amount seemed small to you." Musk paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But investment isn't just about money. It's about recognizing value. The team at St. Clair's invested something far more precious than cash. They invested themselves." The room had transformed. The awkward tension of moments before had given way to something deeper. Phones still recorded, but many had been lowered as their owners became witnesses rather than just documentarians. Carlton opened his mouth to retort, but Musk continued quietly. "Your net worth is what, $2 billion? 3? You could have purchased every piece of equipment this hospital needs and never noticed the difference in your account. Instead, you used your wealth to humiliate someone trying to save children's lives." He shook his head slightly. "That's not the action of a successful man, Mr. Rhodes. That's the action of a very poor investor." The subtle redefinition of wealth hung in the air. Several audience members shifted their gazes to their laps, suddenly aware of their own calculation failures. The math was simple. If contribution to human welfare was the measure, then many in the room were running significant deficits despite their financial portfolios. Carlton stood frozen, caught between rage and the dawning recognition that anything he said now would only compound the damage. After a painfully long moment, he turned and strode toward the exit, his entourage scrambling to follow. The auctioneer cleared his throat, desperate to restore normalcy. "We have a bid of $20 million for 4 pediatric ventilator systems to be donated to St. Clair's Children's Hospital. Going once, going twice. Sold to Mr. Elon Musk." The gavel came down with a decisive crack that seemed to break the spell over the crowd. Applause erupted, beginning tentatively but quickly building to thunderous proportions. People rose to their feet, not just in recognition of Musk's generosity, but in a collective desire to reposition themselves on the right side of the moment. Social media posts were already being revised to emphasize their proximity to the event rather than to Carlton Rhodes. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it." Sarah Winters stood in the center of St. Clair's newly equipped pediatric ICU 3 weeks later, watching as the final ventilator was calibrated by the installation team. The once outdated room now gleamed with state-of-the-art equipment, not just the 4 ventilator systems, but also new monitoring stations, diagnostic equipment, and even a completely renovated family waiting area. The $20 million had stretched far beyond their original hope of a single ventilator. "Everything looks operational, Ms. Winters," the lead technician confirmed, handing her the final paperwork. Your team's training is complete, and the service contract is active. Mr. Musk's office has requested weekly updates on the equipment usage for the first month. Sarah nodded, still sometimes disbelieving when she walked into the transformed space. That night at the auction had gone viral within hours. Clips of Musk's quiet takedown of Carlton Rhodes had circulated across every platform. But what fewer people saw was the hour after the auction. Musk had sat with her, asking detailed questions about the hospital's needs, making notes on his phone and connecting her directly with his foundation's healthcare team. Outside the ICU windows, a small crowd of reporters still gathered daily, hoping for a glimpse of either Musk or the equipment that had sparked one of the most widely shared moments of public accountability in recent memory. The hospital's administrators, once reluctant to fund the upgrade, now proudly conducted tours, careful to emphasize their partnership with the frontline staff who had initiated the fundraising. The most unexpected outcome, however, had been the wave of similar interventions at charity events across the country. The video had triggered something, a reassessment of the performative nature of elite philanthropy. 2 major hedge fund managers had established substantial endowments for children's hospitals in their cities. A fashion mogul had funded a complete rebuild of a rural medical center. The term Rhodes Reckoning had become shorthand for the moment when wealth was called to genuine account. Carlton Rhodes himself had disappeared from public view for nearly 2 weeks after the incident. When he re-emerged, it was with a carefully crafted statement announcing his commitment to donate half his wealth to medical causes over his lifetime. Few believed the sudden conversion was entirely genuine, but the pressure to follow through was immense. His first major gift to a children's cancer research center had been delivered without a press conference or naming opportunity. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Patel in pediatric cardiology. Mia's weaning protocol is working perfectly on the new equipment. Extubation scheduled for tomorrow. Parents sending their thanks again. Sarah smiled, remembering 5-year-old Mia's face when she'd explained the special new breathing helper that would be supporting her through her recovery. The little girl had solemnly informed Sarah that the machine looked like a friendly robot, a description that Sarah had included in one of her weekly reports, much to the apparent amusement of Musk's team. The following month, a package arrived addressed personally to Sarah. Inside, she found a simple framed quote and a handwritten note. The quote read, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." The note, signed simply E, said, "Investment theory suggests directing resources where they generate maximum return. By this measure, your team made the smartest investment I've seen this year. The equipment is hardware. You and your colleagues are the operating system that makes it valuable." Sarah hung the framed quote in the staff break room, where it served as both inspiration and reminder. The $300,000 they had raised hadn't purchased the equipment they needed, but it had purchased something perhaps more valuable. It had bought presence at the precise moment and place where their determination could intersect with the power to help. Sometimes, when working night shifts, Sarah would think about that moment in the ballroom when everything had changed. It hadn't been about the money in the end, though the equipment was saving lives daily. It had been about recognition that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in dedication, that wealth can be defined by what you give rather than what you keep. The last line of Musk's note had become something of an unofficial motto among the saints. Claire's staff, appearing on everything from coffee mugs to the hospital's internal newsletter, "The best investment strategy? Find something that matters and commit everything to it. Returns may appear delayed but are ultimately infinite." Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.